7.4 Graphing an equation help. So I'm going to do a problem that was part of your homework. So you were supposed to do 26 through 29 on page 320. I'm going to first do number 29, and if this doesn't get too long, I'll do more. But as of right now, I'm going to start with number 29. What's really important is that we notice what the directions tell us to do. So it's telling us to write and graph an equation in two variables that shows the relationship between the time and the distance traveled. When we see that right away, we need to recognize that we have to use D equals R times T. D being the distance, R being the speed, and T being the time. If you remember in our notes that we took, it says that we will be given, they're going to give us what the speed is. So in this case, we're talking about a satellite, and it's stated like this. Moves 960 kilometers every 4 hours. They gave us a speed. They told us it's 960 kilometers every 4 hours. So we have to think of that like a rate. And we have to take our 960 kilometers every 4 hours. So basically, as I speak about it, I have to recognize that that line is standing for every. And if you go back to when we did rates, that's what we talked about. You can write a rate like this if I wanted to, 960 kilometers for every 4 hours. I also talked to you about how it's also like a fraction, and that's what we're doing right there. So now that I have it like a fraction, I have to recognize that I can reduce it. To reduce it, I say how many times can 4 go into 960, or 960 divided by 4. Well, 4 can go into 9 2 times. 4 times 2 is 8. 1 left over. Bring down my 6. 4 goes into 16 4 times. 0. Bring down my 0. That's something that a lot of you miss. 4 goes into 0 0 times. So now I'm left with 240 kilometers for every 1 hour. And we know that any whole number over 1 equals just what that whole number is. So now I found my speed. It's 240 kilometers every hour. So now I can start filling in what I now know. So I know that I have D, because I don't know the total distance yet. I also know my speed is 240 kilometers every hour. Do I know anything about my time yet? No. So now I have to figure out what are my independent and my dependent variables. My T for time is my independent variable because it's the one that can move. I can change that. And my D for my distance is my dependent variable because that's the one that depends on what the actual time is in order to be an answer. Remember, it's always that one that's after my equal sign. It's all by itself. Okay, now I'm going to remember my steps. When I'm filling out my table, because I wrote my equation's taken care of. I've got D equals 240 times T. Now I have to graph it now I have to graph my two variable equation, but starting off with my table. So the first thing I put in my first column is my independent variable. Then I put my equation. My third column will be my dependent variable. And my fourth column will be my ordered pairs. So now I got to figure out, well, which is which? Like, where do all those things fit into play from what my equation is? We said my independent variable happens to be T, which is my time. And then my equation is D equals 240 T. My dependent variable is my D for distance. And my ordered pairs would be my independent variable first, which is my T, my dependent variable second, which is my D. Now just remember that this still is my X and my Y. We're just using different variables to represent them. Okay, so with these directions, I'm now going to start my table. My first column, like I showed you, is number 1, my independent variable. So I'm going to make that my time. It's represented as a T. Now, what is our time? It moves 960 kilometers every 4 minutes. We also need to show that this is in minutes. Okay. My second column is my equation. So I'm going to actually put my equation in here, and you can write the word equation if you want to. You don't have to. You could just write your equation, which happens to be D equals 240 times T. Then my third column is my dependent variable. My dependent variable is my distance, which we represented with a D, and my distance was in kilometers. That is something very important because when we get to the graph part, you need to know that. And then lastly, my fourth column that I've talked about over here is my ordered pair. So my ordered pairs is my last one. Now, I've said to you that we need to have at least 3 ordered pairs in order to get good data to make a graph out of. So, that's what I expect you to do, is at least 3. Could you do more than 3? Well, absolutely. But I don't expect it from you. Okay. So now, and we've talked about this several times, the T, the time. Okay, now we're talking about a satellite and how it moves. If we're talking about a satellite, I mean, if it's moving 960 kilometers every 4 minutes, it moves fairly fast. So we're going to go within minutes. You could go lower than 4 minutes. You could say, what does it equal in 3 minutes? You could do 6 minutes, 9 minutes, intervals that are, if you want to do equal intervals, that's fine. You could do 1, 2, 3. I mean, you could really do it however you want as far as minutes go. But because it started with 4, I mean, we could do 2. We've got 4. Let's do 2, 6, and let's just say 10. Okay? I might not have made, like I said, you can make it equal intervals if you want. You don't have to. And now when we fill in our variable, or our equation, it will be D equals 240 times my time. Same thing here. D equals 240 times my time. D equals 240 times my time. I just plugged in what T was. These numbers right here are just me guessing. They're not me finding information in the book. It's not anything like that. It's what I've guessed. Now I solve. So I say 240 times 2, and that's going to be what my distance equals. 240 times 6, that's what my distance equals. 240 times 10, that's what my distance equals, and you can fill in those as you go. Okay, so those are my answers. And then when you do your ordered pair, okay, you're going to fill in what your ordered pair is. So I've got 2 for my time, 6 for my time, and 10 for my time. These are in minutes, remember. Then I have my distance that it travels would be 480 kilometers. My distance that it travels at 6 minutes would be 1,440 kilometers. And my distance that it travels at 10 minutes would be 2,400 minutes. No, sorry. Kilometers. I think I said minutes before, too. Too much math today. All right. So those are my 3 ordered pairs. Now I need to put them onto a graph, and this is how I do that. Now be careful on something like this. And by the way, I just rewrote out my ordered pairs so I can move on to a new page and do some more writing. But be careful. I mean, when I look back at this, it looks like the number 2,480, but this is actually an ordered pair, and that comma is separating it. It's not actually a number, okay? Number 1, that wouldn't be correct either with that. So just be careful that you don't get confused. Okay, so I have 2 different, obviously my lines on my graph, you need to label them X and Y. Your X-axis is going to be your, we had that was what we used for our time. If you don't label this on a test or a quiz, it's minus half a point, and our time is in minutes. That's crucial that you do that. Over here, this is our distance, and our distance on our y-axis is in kilometers, and if you just want to put it in as km, that's fine. Now, they have to be equal intervals. When we did our time in minutes, we went 2, 6, and 10, so I'm just going to do it by twos. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. And then when I go up my distance, I go from 480 up to 2400. So a good way to look at that is, alright, I should probably go in 500s. So I'm going to start at 500, 1000, 1500, 2000, 2500, and then I can write in my numbers from there. Now I can start plotting. Now remember, we're just doing this on lined paper, so do your best. But my first one is 2 minutes for every 480 kilometers. So it's going to be a little bit below the 500 mark. But make sure you're labeling your ordered pairs on your graph. Then I have 6 minutes, 1,440 kilometers. So a little bit below the 1,400, the 1,500 mark. 6, 1,440. And then my last one was 10, 2,400. So I'm going to go all the way up to almost my 2,500, obviously. Okay. And now I'm just going to do the best I can to actually connect my dots. Now, I stopped right here for a reason at the very corner because I can't go negative. We can't go back in time and because we're dealing with time, right? So your graph should look like that. There is a lot to this, but it's really not all that hard if you just follow your steps. Look back in your notes and try and compare the steps that you did. It will be very helpful. Hope this helps. Good luck.